Think about this. Your mind is always working, and it always has been since the day you were born. It processes, analyzes, reacts, remembers, imagines, fears, hopes, and obsesses without rest. Your mind is not idle. It is a battlefield, and your inner dialogue is the weapon. It can either be used to cut through confusion and fear, or to wound yourself with doubt and self-sabotage. That is why you must take the reins and gain control. Not sometimes, not only when it's easy, every single day. Each morning you wake, the war begins anew. You might not hear the horns or see the flags, but the fight is real. Thoughts rise like smoke, some helpful, some destructive. The undisciplined mind drifts effortlessly toward negativity. Why? Because it is easy to be negative. It is the path of least resistance. It takes no effort to complain, no strength to blame, no courage to give up. Negativity is mental decay. It is what happens when you abandon the work of cultivating virtue. It is the laziness of the mind, the default setting we fall into when we don't take ownership. But to be positive, to be strong, to walk with courage, that is rare. That is demanding. It requires something from you, not once, but constantly. It is a challenge. It is a struggle worth facing. It takes daily practice. It takes the kind of training that doesn't show off for applause, but trains in silence. Being consistent with your thoughts is not about pretending to be perfect. It's about committing to the process of mastery, of awareness, of self-honesty. We are human. We slip. We forget. We fall into old patterns. Sometimes we wander off for a day, sometimes for months. But the Stoic is different, not because they never fall, but because they notice when they do. They pause, they reflect, they admit, I've slipped. And that act alone, that clarity, that courage to be honest, is the first step back. It's the beginning of restoration. Acknowledgement leads to correction, and correction done with discipline and consistency leads to strength. Every single day you wake up is another round. The fight doesn't end with yesterday's win. Yesterday's control means nothing today. The victories are not cumulative. Each morning resets the battlefield. And so, if you won the day before, do not celebrate too early. Tomorrow waits with its own tests and trials. This is not a quick program. This is not a seasonal challenge. This is your life. This is the war you must win not once, but again and again. But here's the truth that few will tell you. If you can maintain control, not flawlessly but faithfully, over a long period of time, then the balance of power shifts. Then you begin to master your mind instead of being mastered by it. You don't just react, you choose. You don't just endure, you grow. You don't just hold on, you rise. That is the prize of vigilance. That is what it means to hold the keys to your mind. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The enemy is not out there. The first step in winning the war in your mind is to realize that the enemy is not external. The true conflict is internal. The Stoics taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This is not a pleasant realization. It is a confrontation. We often believe that other people, outside circumstances, or misfortune are the cause of our inner turmoil. But the Stoic clears the fog and brings the gaze inward. It is there, beneath the noise and distraction, that the true war is being fought. This shift in perspective is not comfortable. It is far easier to blame others than to hold ourselves accountable. Accountability demands humility. It requires us to look in the mirror and admit that we too are capable of error, self-deception, and overreaction. We are conditioned to externalize pain, to look for villains, for injustice, for the hand that pushed us. But the Stoic sees clearly. The only true enemy is the lie we tell ourselves to avoid responsibility. And that is exactly why the Stoic path is powerful. It doesn't offer comfort, it offers clarity. It calls for strength that others avoid. It demands courage of a different sort, the courage to look at yourself unflinchingly and say, "This is on me." That courage is not weakness. It is the bedrock of transformation. It is the foundation of internal sovereignty. If your peace can be taken from you by a comment, a rejection, or a bad day, then you are not free. That kind of fragile peace is not true peace. It is dependency. And if your contentment depends on the approval of others, you are not in control of your own experience. It means your emotions have been outsourced. The Stoic aims to be the master of their inner life, not a servant to the tides of external opinion. True power begins when you claim your own mind back from the chaos of the world and the chaos within yourself. When you decide, with full awareness, that no person, no outcome, no condition will have the final say over your peace, you take your first real step towards sovereignty. This sovereignty begins not with force, but with attention. It starts when you begin to filter every emotion and thought through the lens of reason. Reason is your compass, your shield, your scalpel. It helps you separate what is true from what is noise, what is useful from what is illusion. When you engage this process seriously, you slowly pull your mind out of slavery and into freedom. This is not a dramatic declaration. It is a quiet, unshakable resolve to no longer allow the outside world to control your inner world. It's a subtle but seismic shift, the decision to become the architect of your own thoughts. This means developing a new relationship with your thoughts, not one of blind obedience, but of active observation. You become the witness to your own mind. You must learn to be both the thinker and the observer of your thinking. This dual awareness takes effort, but it opens the door to wisdom. Watch how quickly anger arises when expectations are not met. Then question the expectations themselves. Trace its root back to entitlement or misunderstanding. Notice how easily envy is triggered when others seem to succeed. Then ask if you've neglected your own growth. Understand that envy often points to a part of us we have neglected to nourish. Observe how fear disguises itself as caution or overthinking, whispering the worst-case scenario and paralyzing your action. These are not faults. They are signals, like fire alarms. They alert you to where something needs attention, not where you must surrender. Do not act on these emotions reflexively. Instead, treat them as messengers, not commanders. Respect them for what they reveal, but do not let them lead. See them for what they are, visitors, not masters. You are the host, and the host sets the tone. The guest may arrive loud, bringing their drama and urgency, but it is the host who decides how long they stay and what influence they will have in the house. You can listen without obeying. You can understand without surrendering. The Stoic is not unfeeling, they are discerning. Practice inserting a pause before your reaction. That pause is power. It's in that gap that the war is either won or lost. The pause is the arena, the ground where instinct and intention meet. In that moment, you can either be pulled by impulse or guided by reason. The Stoics trained their minds to live in that pause, to choose their response with clarity, to act with alignment. That pause is not weakness. It is precision. It is presence. It is you, choosing your next move with deliberation instead of being flung by habit. Every time you slow your reaction, you are reclaiming territory from the automatic, unconscious patterns that dominate most people's lives. Every time you respond with reason rather than emotion, you are reinforcing your strength. This is not a one-time event. It is a skill, a craft, a discipline. It is the art of self-possession. and it must be practiced with the diligence of a warrior preparing for battle each and every day. You must rehearse your values until they are second nature. You must inspect your habits like a general reviewing their strategy. You must refine your thoughts like a sculptor perfecting their work. With each act of restraint, each conscious response, you build a life of integrity, a mind of steel, and a heart that does not flinch. That is how the Stoic wins. One thought at a time, one moment at a time, one pause at a time. Until that pause becomes your practice, and your practice becomes your power. Chapter 2. Discipline is defense. Victory in the war of the mind does not come from a single moment of enlightenment. It does not arrive wrapped in glory or revelation. It comes from daily preparation, quiet repetition, and the slow accumulation of strength. Just like a soldier polishes his armor and sharpens his blade each morning without fail, the Stoic prepares for the trials of the day with philosophy. They do not wait for the crisis to begin their training. They are already prepared. They train the mind to respond with wisdom, not emotion. And in that discipline, they build a shield. Discipline becomes your defense against impulse, against chaos, against yourself. Discipline is what separates the reactive from the deliberate. Epictetus warned, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." These words are not soft encouragement. They are a command. There is no avoiding the necessity of practice, no skipping the repetitions. Discipline is not about punishment. It is about alignment. You choose your values, your virtues, and then you live according to them. You become your own law. The gap between who you want to be and how you behave must close. Otherwise, your values are fiction. This daily discipline shows up in the little choices: waking up when the alarm rings, saying no to indulgent distractions, choosing patience instead of irritation. It lives in silence. It operates without applause. Each moment is a brick laid down on the path to mastery. It is not glamorous, it is not dramatic, but it is steady, consistent, unshakable. It is the daily act of building a fortress within. Discipline also trains your identity. Every small act of control rewrites how you see yourself. You are no longer someone trying to be disciplined. You are someone who is disciplined. That shift is quiet but powerful. The Stoic does not wait for motivation. They do not rely on mood. They rely on principle. They move by decision, not desire. They understand that the storm may come at any time, so they anchor themselves in routine, in order, in structure, even when no one is watching. And when others falter in the face of temptation or stress, the Stoic stands steady because they have practiced being steady in private. They've rehearsed self-restraint when it didn't matter, so they can execute it when it does. That is the hidden purpose of discipline. It creates a kind of mental muscle memory, a practiced calm, a readiness that does not panic. You do not rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your training. And the Stoic trains every day. Chapter 3. The voice you feed. Inside your mind are many voices. Some push you forward, some pull you back, some whisper courage, some scream doubt, some recall past failures, others predict future disasters. The Stoic does not deny these voices. They do not pretend to be free from inner noise. Instead, they develop discernment. They listen to all, but they only feed one. Because the voice you feed becomes the voice that leads. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." That imagination often sounds like a voice saying, "You can't," or "You'll fail," or "They'll laugh." These are lies, but lies repeated enough begin to sound like truth, and when those lies are unchallenged, they become the foundation of your identity. The way to counter them is to consciously speak truth, to say it aloud, to write it down, to repeat it until it becomes stronger than the lie. Your internal dialogue is not just a reflection, it's a program. It determines what you expect, how you act, what you pursue, and what you avoid. Every time you speak to yourself with strength, with reason, with clarity, you are reinforcing the code of resilience. You are rewriting your defaults. You are training your mind to follow virtue, not emotion. You are shifting from chaos to command. Speak to yourself as a leader would. Speak with encouragement, but not with excuses. Remind yourself of your responsibilities, not just your rights. Be firm, not cruel. Be demanding, not demeaning. Hold yourself to high standards, but not with hatred. Recognize that you are both the student and the teacher of your mind. You are shaping who you become every time you speak. The war is not just about silence, it is about the sound you allow to echo within. Every repeated thought, every habitual phrase is either sharpening your weapon or dulling your edge. The Stoic trains their inner voice with purpose. They use morning reflections, evening evaluations, and moments of solitude as training grounds. They correct negative spirals as soon as they begin. They do not allow self-pity or self-contempt to stay too long, and when fear speaks, they challenge it. When doubt rises, they respond with reason. This is the inner strategy. This is how the Stoic gains the upper hand, by mastering the soundscape of the soul. Chapter 4. The Art of Losing Well. No matter how disciplined, no matter how aware you become, you will still fall. You will still lose some battles. But the Stoic does not expect perfection. The Stoic expects effort. There will be mornings when the negativity wins, days when fear takes over, moments when you say something unwise, act impulsively, or doubt yourself. The battle was lost, but the war continues. Marcus Aurelius would write, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant." He didn't write this as an excuse. He wrote it as preparation, because even emperors fell, but they got up. Losing a moment doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. What defines you is not the stumble. It's whether you choose to stay down or stand up wiser. What matters is your response. Do you fall into self-loathing and stay there, feeding the voice of shame and prolonging your defeat? Or do you pause, breathe, and look at the misstep with clarity, asking what it came to teach you? The Stoic does not catastrophize failure. They examine it. They extract the lesson, and then they move on. To the Stoic, a failure is not a final judgment. It is a checkpoint. It reveals where your training was weak, where your emotion overrode your principle, or where your vigilance slipped. But rather than wallow, they recalibrate. They step back onto the path with a deeper awareness and a sharper edge. The Stoic keeps a short memory for past failures, not because they don't care, but because they know time is limited and energy is sacred. They are too busy working on the next moment to get stuck in what they can no longer change. Losing well is a skill. It keeps you humble because it reminds you that you are always in training, always under refinement. It is a check against arrogance, a return to the truth that mastery is a process, not a possession. You are not above error. No one is. But by acknowledging that truth without shame, you retain your humanity while sharpening your wisdom. It keeps you grounded in effort, not ego. It keeps you growing because you understand that no defeat is wasted unless you ignore its lesson. Each failure is a mirror, showing you where you must focus your attention. It reveals where your reasoning faltered, where emotions stole the reins, or where pride blinded your judgment. But when you engage that failure with honest reflection, it becomes a teacher, a forge, a necessary heat that tempers your spirit. And over time, this process builds something unshakable inside you, Losing well means you don't turn your back on the pain of failure. You face it, feel it, and then move forward. Not impulsively, but with deliberate strength. You become more durable, more patient, more aware. And this maturity helps you win more battles down the road because you're seeing clearly. You've earned insight that only failure could teach. You've paid the price, and now you carry the reward. Perspective. Every time you rise with more self-awareness and less ego, you are becoming a more formidable warrior. The blade of your mind is being sharpened not only by success, but by every cut, every slip, every wound you refuse to let define you. You don't need to win every fight to win the war. The true test is your consistency, your return, your resolve. You need to stay in it, eyes forward, always learning, always adjusting, always showing up again. That is what makes you dangerous to doubt, resilient to pressure, and steady in the storm. Chapter 5. Training in Solitude. To win the war in your mind, you must train when no one is watching. Silence is the gym. Reflection is the weight. Stillness is the sparring partner. Modern life is loud. It wants your attention, your opinion, your outrage. But the Stoic seeks quiet, because it is in quiet that clarity grows. You must carve out moments in the day to be still, not entertained, not distracted, just present. Seneca advised, withdraw into yourself, especially when you are forced to be in a crowd. He didn't mean to become antisocial. He meant to become anchored. In solitude, you face the raw truth. You realize what you've been avoiding. The noise falls away. The roles, expectations, and illusions begin to loosen their grip. You are left with just yourself, and that is where the real work begins. You hear your thoughts more clearly. You recognize patterns you were blind to before. You see the games your ego plays. This is not easy. In fact, it can be unsettling. It is tempting to stay distracted because distraction protects us from discomfort. And in a world overflowing with entertainment, noise, and obligations, it is easier than ever to remain comfortably numb. But discomfort is the doorway to development. The Stoics knew this well. They didn't seek pain for pain's sake, but they didn't flee from it either. Because in discomfort, you find clarity. You begin to understand which desires are artificial and which are essential. You start to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of reason. And most importantly, you see what parts of yourself are still untrained. Train yourself to sit in the quiet. Not once, not just when you feel overwhelmed. Make it a discipline, a ritual, a return to your center. Ask yourself hard questions, not just about what you want, but about why you want it. Question your motives, your habits, your reactions. Journal until your excuses surface and dissolve. Meditate until the initial noise gives way to insight. Reflect on your actions, not with shame, but with the goal of alignment. Are you living by the principles you say you value? Are your actions matching your intentions? Are you becoming the person you claim to admire? This is how the Stoic keeps the blade sharp, not by waiting for life to teach them lessons through chaos, but by willingly stepping into reflection and forging wisdom in the silence. Solitude is not escape, it is preparation. It is where the invisible victories are won, and those invisible victories are what make public battles more bearable. Because the war in your mind is not fought just in moments of stress, but in moments of stillness. The stronger you become in solitude, the more stable you become under pressure. Chapter 6. Thought is action. In the Stoic view, thinking is never passive. It is the first form of action. Before the word, before the step, before the strike, there is the thought. And that thought determines the nature of everything that follows. The war in your mind is not just about silencing what is harmful, but about actively cultivating what is good. What you allow to grow in your mind becomes what you sow in your life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." This is not metaphor, it is blueprint. Think in fear, and fear colors your speech, your posture, your decisions. Think in bitterness, and bitterness infects your relationships. Think in clarity and discipline, and clarity and discipline begin to shape your world. That is why thought is not a neutral space, it is a battleground. Every thought you entertain is a seed, and you must decide which you will plant, water, and allow to grow. The Stoic trains to recognize thought as movement. A complaint is not harmless. It is momentum toward despair. A worry is not benign. It is momentum toward paralysis. These are not idle expressions of discomfort. They are rehearsals for surrender. The more you entertain them, the more fluent you become in the language of powerlessness. Every thought leaves a trace. Every repeated narrative becomes a groove. But so too, a rational assessment is a movement toward action. A moment of gratitude is momentum toward peace. A clear intention is momentum toward progress. Every thought is a direction, and repeated thoughts are roads. You must become the builder of those roads. Otherwise, you will be dragged down paths you never consciously chose. The Stoic understands this deeply. They see the mind as a field of battle and cultivation. The weeds of doubt, anger, vanity, and fear do not need permission to grow. They grow by default. But the fruits of discipline, serenity, focus, and purpose must be planted, watered, tended. This is why the battle in the mind is ongoing, not because the mind is your enemy, but because it is fertile. Whatever you plant, it will grow. And if you do not plant with care, something else, something wild, will take root. This is why journaling is so powerful in the Stoic tradition. It is not just a record, it is a reflection, a weapon, a mirror, a training ground, a moment to see your thoughts as if on a battlefield, to separate allies from enemies. It gives you a map. It lets you trace patterns. It reveals where the mind drifts when unguarded. And once seen clearly, you can challenge those patterns. You can question their authority. You can replace them. You can choose new thoughts to march behind, new truths to serve, new values to anchor your mind. Journaling is also a rehearsal for intentional thinking. When you write down what you fear, you strip it of its shadow. When you articulate what you value, you reinforce it in your neural pathways. You no longer let the mind run wild. You walk it, direct it, guide it like a disciplined student. This is how the Stoic becomes the architect of their internal world, not by suppressing thought, but by constructing it, not by denying emotion, but by ordering it. You are not your thoughts, but you are responsible for them. You do not control every thought that enters your mind, but you control which ones stay, which ones you engage, which ones you repeat, which ones you nurture until they take on the weight and tone of truth. To the Stoic, mental training is not simply about resisting the bad, it's about reinforcing the good, about giving your highest values a voice and your best instincts a direction. You train your mind to think in alignment with virtue, and from there, to act in alignment with virtue. That is the victory. That is how the war is won from within, by choosing your thoughts as carefully as you would choose your friends, your strategies, or your weapons. Chapter 7. Guard the gates. The Stoics understood that the mind is a fortress, but it must be guarded constantly, not just against violent attack, but against slow erosion. Most damage to the mind does not come through overwhelming force. It comes through subtle invitation, the gradual drip, the casual exposure, a thought you tolerate, a value you compromise, a distraction you justify. One moment of laziness turns into a habit. One ignored instinct becomes a blind spot. And over time, the discipline that once protected you becomes porous. What you allow through the gates of your attention will eventually take residence in your character, and what takes residence will eventually take control. That's why Stoicism demands more than moments of clarity. It demands vigilance. The battle is not always obvious. It's not just what you fight, it's what you allow, what you scroll past, what you laugh at, what you excuse. These moments are not neutral. They are shaping you when you're not paying attention. Every input has an output. Every exposure has an effect. If your mind is a fortress, then your habits, your environment, and your focus are the guards. And if they're asleep at their post, infiltration is inevitable. Epictetus warned, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." That means the enemy didn't breach the walls. You opened the door, you granted access, you handed over the keys. And often, it's not malicious forces we need to fear. It's our own passive consent to influences that weaken us over time. The enemy doesn't always storm the gates. Sometimes it whispers softly, repeatedly, until your standards fall and your guard lowers. The war in your mind is not just fought at the moment of attack. It is fought in the decisions you make about what you read, what you watch, who you listen to, what you believe, and what you dwell on in silence. Attention is the currency of your consciousness, and most of the world is designed to drain it, not through violence, but through addiction, through endless stimulation, through constant novelty, through the manipulation of your curiosity and your impulses. Every ping, every scroll, every algorithm is calibrated to fracture your focus, your phone, your habits, your environment. These are not neutral. They are either shaping you toward clarity and focus or pulling you into chaos and confusion. And it happens slowly, invisibly. You are being trained every day, either deliberately by your values or accidentally by your environment. Either you direct your attention or something else will do it for you. A Stoic does not leave the gates open. They do not let everything in. They guard their attention like a treasure because they understand its power. They are selective, discerning, aware. Every piece of information, every conversation, every moment of idle attention is either strengthening their inner fortress or compromising its walls. Because they understand that who you become is directly tied to what you consume, what you expose yourself to, and what you permit to linger in your field of awareness. Attention is not cheap, it is the most valuable resource you have. If attention is a form of energy, then what you give it to becomes more powerful in your life, and what you starve will wither. You cultivate strength not just by what you resist, but by what you deliberately focus on. Guarding the mind means saying no, often and intentionally. It means interrupting the pattern before it becomes a problem. It means identifying the subtle ways mediocrity enters your habits, through convenience, through conformity, through emotional fatigue, and actively creating distance from it. It means creating friction between yourself and what would dilute your values. It means turning down the volume of gossip, outrage, vanity, and excess. It means refusing to let the trivial become central. It means recognizing that silence is often more strengthening than stimulation, and that solitude is not loneliness. It is restoration. Choosing simplicity when the world offers distraction is not withdrawal. It is alignment. It means building a life where your highest ideals are reflected in your daily routines, where each repetition reflects your code, not your cravings, where each environment you enter is chosen with purpose. It means stepping away from environments that normalize weakness and returning to principles that fortify strength. The Stoic is not antisocial, but they are selective with their circle. They know that influence is contagious. They do not allow those without discipline to influence the disciplines they've fought hard to build. They are not interested in energy that scatters or drains. Friendship is not just about comfort, it is about reinforcement, about building a wall of shared virtue around the mind. Your circle should sharpen you, not soften you. It should challenge your excuses, not echo them. If you're surrounded by mediocrity, it will slowly become your standard. It is not just who you listen to, but who you let close enough to shape your patterns. Guarding the gates also means setting internal filters. Not every thought that arrives deserves engagement. Not every craving requires fulfillment. Not every feeling must be explored. Some are guests that must be turned away at the door. Others should never have been invited. Many thoughts appear as internal whispers, but they are echoes of past influences, unresolved insecurities, or cultural noise. Just because a thought comes to mind doesn't mean it has a right to stay. It must earn that right through alignment with reason and virtue. The Stoic watches for the signs, that rush of ego, that flicker of comparison, that surge of defensiveness, and when it rises, they intercept it, not with panic, but with presence. They do not argue with the thought, they do not amplify it. They observe, they reflect, they redirect, they choose. That is a kind of inner martial art, the redirection of mental energy toward what is useful and away from what is corrosive. Each time you do this, you reclaim a little more ground. Each act of inner discipline becomes part of the architecture of your character. To win the war in your mind, you must become the gatekeeper, constantly aware of what enters, constantly shaping what remains, not paranoid, but principled, not anxious, but awake. You must set the terms of what deserves your attention. You must guard the hours of your day and the content of your thoughts with the same care a general guards a strategic outpost. Because what you protect now becomes who you are later. What you allow in moments of tiredness or weakness will grow roots. And when distractions knock, you meet them not with fear or anger, but with the calm authority of someone who knows their inner world is sacred. That is how the Stoic stands guard, with silence, with standards, with reflection, with rituals, and with the discipline to protect what matters most, not for one day, but for a lifetime. The war never ends, but neither does your watch, and that too is a virtue. Chapter 8. The Battle of Perception. The war in the mind is not only about thought and discipline, it is equally a war of perception. Before we react, before we even form a belief, we perceive. How you see determines how you suffer, how you respond, and how you endure. Perception is the filter through which every experience passes. The Stoics taught that events themselves are neutral. It is our judgment of them that creates turmoil or tranquility. It is not the circumstance, but our commentary, not the moment, but the meaning we assign to it. What matters is not what happens, but how you frame what happens. And that frame is forged in philosophy, day by day, decision by decision. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. This is not denial. It is not an escape from reality. It is command over perception. It is the refusal to give your peace away. This is the decision to not hand over your emotions to the world's shifting tides, to not let circumstances decide your character. The Stoic accepts what is, but they define what it means. The external world may bring chaos, but it cannot bring defeat unless your mind agrees to it. And that agreement is your responsibility. Perception is not about ignoring reality. It is about interpreting it through the lens of wisdom and purpose. It's about examining a setback and choosing to see structure instead of disorder. It's about looking at hardship and asking, what strength is being summoned from me right now? The Stoic trains themselves to ask, what is in my control? What does this moment demand of me? What virtue does this trial call forth? These questions realign your attention away from victimhood and toward agency. They stop the spiral. They replace panic with poise. They do not eliminate pain, but they place it within a greater meaning. They transform it from punishment into practice. To the Stoic, suffering is not something to be avoided. It is something to be examined, to be understood, to be met with courage, not complaint. When the mind is trained to perceive obstacles as opportunities, every challenge becomes fuel. A delay becomes patience. A betrayal becomes clarity. A failure becomes instruction. A hardship becomes a proving ground. This is not naive optimism. It is strategic realism. This is the battlefield of perception, where life's events are reinterpreted into tools of transformation. The same fire that burns also tempers steel. This battle must be fought every day, not once, not occasionally, but every single day, because perception is not fixed. It drifts. It degrades when left unattended. The world will not make it easy. It is not designed to support clarity. It thrives on noise, exaggeration, outrage, and distraction. It will urge you to dramatize, to exaggerate, to catastrophize. It will feed your fear, magnify your wounds, and tempt you into interpreting every inconvenience as a personal attack. It will invite you to make yourself the victim of every interruption, the center of every offense. And if you are not careful, your perception will become a lens of distortion rather than discernment. But the Stoic stands firm in simplicity. They resist the urge to inflate what is small, to turn discomfort into injustice, to let one bad moment shape the tone of an entire day. They strip away the noise, the narrative, the unnecessary emotion. They do not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask, "What can I do with this?" They return to the facts. They anchor themselves in what is. They ask, "What happened?" Not, "What does this say about me?" or "What will people think?" Because perception clouded by ego leads to reactivity, but perception grounded in truth leads to calm, deliberate action. That clarity is a weapon. That calm vision is power. It doesn't mean you don't feel, but it means your feelings do not lead you astray. Because when you see clearly, you act wisely. And wisdom in action is how peace is preserved. In mastering perception, the Stoic wins without needing to fight. They win not by defeating the world, but by refusing to be conquered by it. The battlefield is internal, and the enemy is often not the event itself, but the interpretation you attach to it. They stop the battle before it begins, by refusing to be drawn into emotional spirals, false assumptions, or the drama of ego. They intercept the story before it becomes suffering. They replace instinct with intention. They shift their perspective before it sinks them. They say, "Let me see what's really here, not what my fear tells me is here." And they mean it. They strip illusion from perception like armor from a fallen foe. They remind themselves that everything external is raw material, and it is their reason that gives it shape. Life offers no inherent meaning, only events, only moments, only facts. Whether it's praise or insult, success or failure, comfort or chaos, none of it carries meaning until your mind assigns it one. It is not the situation, but the story. It is not the stimulus, but the structure you apply to it. Events do not dictate the meaning, your philosophy does. And if your philosophy is strong, rooted in virtue and tested by adversity, you will remain unshaken. You will not flinch at criticism, nor inflate with praise. You will not be seduced by luxury or crushed by pain. You will meet all conditions with the same calm authority. This is not indifference. It is not the absence of feeling. This is not apathy. It is not a dullness to life. This is self-command, discipline of perspective. It is clarity in motion. It is the quiet defiance of the storm that rages outside your mind, the calm eye of the hurricane. This is the inner sovereignty to stand still in a storm and say, "This too I will meet with clarity." And not only clarity, but dignity, because how you carry yourself through adversity matters as much as how you overcome it. It is the refusal to become a puppet to emotion, a victim of narrative, a slave to interpretation. It is a declaration of inner independence. The Stoic knows that the real battle is not over what happens, but how it is processed. They do not give up their power by surrendering their sight. They do not let the lens be clouded by chaos, nor let fear narrate the story. They stay rooted, steady, sovereign. Instead, they polish it daily, with reflection, with journaling, with questioning, with stillness, and with honest self-assessment. They prepare before the storm, so that when the winds rise, they are already grounded. They check their assumptions, examine their biases, and ask, "Is this truly harmful or merely uncomfortable?" They clean the windows of perception. They strip away projection and paranoia. They cut through illusion with the blade of discernment. And in that space of clarity, earned, not given, they choose strength again and again. Not because it's easy, not because they are immune to pain, but because they have trained their mind to see through it, to see beyond it, to endure without becoming bitter, to feel deeply without becoming overwhelmed, and to see what matters most with the eyes of a warrior, not a warrior of thought, a warrior of perspective, a warrior of peace. Chapter 9. The Power of Repetition. The Stoic does not aim for perfection in a single day. They aim for consistency across many. In the war of the mind, repetition is power. Habits are the armor you wear into battle. Practice is the weapon you wield. And daily discipline is the path that forges both. The most profound changes in perception, behavior, and identity come not from dramatic efforts, but from small actions repeated with intention. Epictetus taught, "It is difficulties that show what men are, but it is repetition that determines who they become." In times of calm, the Stoic prepares. In times of chaos, they rely on what they have rehearsed. Strength, composure, clarity. These do not appear by accident. They are the result of daily labor. Repetition conditions the mind to respond with order, not panic, with resolve, not confusion. The mind adapts to what it encounters most. If you frequently repeat thoughts of defeat, you become passive. If you practice discipline in your choices, you become steady. The Stoic uses repetition as training, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, not to impress others, but to anchor themselves in virtue. Repeating the right thoughts, questions, and actions creates grooves in the mind that align with wisdom, and so they return to the journal, to the stillness, to the questions. Each morning they ask, "What will I face today, and how will I meet it?" Each night they ask, "Where did I fall short, and what can I do better?" This is not ritual for ritual's sake. It is the sharpening of the self. It is the rehearsal of courage. Repetition does not dull the Stoic. It refines them. To win the war in your mind, you must master the art of returning. Returning not just once, but again and again. To the present moment, not as a vague concept, but as a living battlefield where every breath is a choice. To your values, not as abstract ideals, but as anchors that stabilize your soul when everything around you feels unstable. To the thoughts and actions that serve your highest self, not occasionally, but consistently, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. This returning is not a retreat. It is a discipline, a daily journey back to clarity. Repetition is not a weakness. It is the hidden strength of the resilient. It is the groove that etches strength into the mind. Just as the warrior sharpens their blade daily, the Stoic sharpens their perception, their intention, their character, day after day, year after year. It is the rhythm of transformation, small choices layered over time, invisible victories that quietly reshape your identity. One breath, one thought, one decision, one action, one correction after a misstep, one recentering after distraction, one return after forgetting, one recommitment after faltering. This rhythm becomes your anthem, a song of persistence, of rising again, of building mental muscle through the repetition of virtue. In this, the Stoic find strength not in novelty, but in mastery. They trust the process. They embrace the slow burn. They know that greatness is not a moment. It is a pattern, a lifelong cadence of choosing what is right again and again. That is how the war is won, quietly, steadily, one breath, one thought, one day at a time. Chapter 10. Endure and Transcend. Every Stoic knows that some battles are not meant to be avoided, but endured. The war in your mind is not only about strength or clarity, it is also about patience. There are times when life brings storms that cannot be stopped, only withstood, pain that cannot be removed, only carried, uncertainty that cannot be solved, only outlasted. In these moments, the question is not, how do I fix this? But, how do I remain unmoved within it? Seneca said, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. But there are times when reality does hurt, when life tests you not with a whisper, but with a roar. In these times, Stoicism does not promise escape. It offers endurance. It teaches you to hold the line, to take the hit without crumbling, to bend without breaking, because some victories come not from winning, but from simply not yielding. Endurance is a virtue. It is the discipline to stay steady when everything in you wants to flee. It is the invisible armor that holds you upright when the emotional winds howl through your thoughts. It is the capacity to remain rooted when the winds of chaos try to uproot your peace. It is the art of leaning into discomfort until you no longer fear it, until you've grown beyond its power, until it becomes merely another part of your training. The Stoic does not run from difficulty. They absorb it into their training. They understand that what is hard today becomes strength tomorrow. They embrace adversity as resistance training for the soul. They let suffering refine them, not reduce them. They do not seek comfort, they seek capacity. They do not ask for ease, they ask for strength. They recognize that adversity is not a detour, it is the path. Every hardship becomes an opportunity to grow roots deeper than the surface winds, to anchor oneself in something unshakable, not temporary confidence, but lasting character. To endure is not to numb yourself. It is not suppression. It is sovereignty. It is not denial. It is command. It is to feel fully, to bleed with awareness, but not be ruled by those feelings. It is to sit with pain and not let it rewrite your story, not let it poison your outlook. It is to accept reality without becoming cynical, to hold the line without collapsing inward, to see the darkness without letting it swallow your light, to feel pain without letting it turn you bitter. Endurance is not passive, it is deeply active, it is vigilance, it is devotion, it is a daily commitment. It is a dialogue with the self that says, yes, this hurts, but I remain. It is a conversation with the soul that repeats, I will not break here. I will not let this moment define me. I will pass through this, and I will rise from it. And that conversation is not always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper, sometimes it's all you have. But the whisper is enough when it is consistent, because that whisper becomes your mantra, and that mantra becomes your will. To win the war in your mind, you must know how to fight, and you must know how to endure. Some days you advance, some days you survive, some days you crawl, some days you are brought to your knees. But even then, the Stoic keeps going, because stillness is not surrender. Because motion is not the only form of progress. Because resistance, even in silence, is a form of victory. But every day you grow, you evolve, you sharpen, you become more than what you once were. Because the one who endures with dignity, with patience in the process, with faith in their strength, with commitment to their principles, is not merely surviving, they are transcending. They are elevating above the temporary by anchoring themselves in the eternal. They do not just pass through the storm, they become stronger because of it. They learn the shape of their strength, the depth of their resilience, the truth of their values. That is the power of endurance. It is not just staying alive, it is staying aligned with your values, with your virtue, with your vision, with the version of you that is yet to emerge, but is forged through every test you refuse to let break you. And that is victory, not in spite of the storm, but through it.